Welcome to Students Incorporated. I'm your host, Mr. Jason. Join me weekly as my students and I bring you content that's informative, positive, fun, and uplifting. This podcast is created and produced with the help of students from the International Community School of Bangkok. Today we're talking about something we all deal with every single day: information overload. We live in a world where the news never stops. It's on our phones, it's in our social feeds, and on TV 24/7. But how much of it actually sticks? And more importantly, how much of it actually is relevant to our lives? Today we're exploring how to cut through the noise. We are joined by a visionary who realized that substance doesn't have to be long-winded. She is the founder of Bitesize BKK, a platform that has completely redefined how news consumers can stay informed without burning out. Then in our second segment, we continue part 8 of our adventure story, The Mystery of St. Augustine. But before we get into our interview, let's hear our quote of the day and get some headline news.
Our quote of the day comes from George Orwell. Journalism is printing what someone else does not want printed. Everything else is public relations. This quote means that real journalism is about revealing important truths, especially information that powerful people might prefer to keep hidden. Orwell is emphasizing that journalism is not just about sharing news or promoting ideas. Its real purpose is to hold people accountable and inform the public, even when the truth is uncomfortable. And that's our quote of the day. Now on to some headline news.
Thank you for our quote of the day. Now let's dive into the headlines. Today we're looking at how the way we consume news is being completely rewritten in 2026. Our first headline comes from the Pew Research Center's 2026 News Habitat Report. For the first time in history, TikTok has overtaken YouTube, Facebook, and the primary news source for Gen Z. In fact, 43% of social media users under 30 now get their daily news update directly from TikTok. But here's the twist. They aren't following traditional news brands. They are following independent creators, often called news influencers, who delivers organic short-form video. This shift suggests that authenticity is becoming more important to young audiences than a famous newsroom logo. Moving closer to home, a new report titled Thailand Media Landscape 2026 reveals a staggering statistics. 100% of major Thai media organizations surveyed have now integrated AI into their daily workflows. Tools like ChatGPT and Gemini are being used to summarize long reports and speed up production. However, there's a catch. While AI makes the news faster, the Reuters Institute warns that 54% of audiences feel uncomfortable with news produced primarily by machines. This leaves a massive opening for journalists like our guest, Niki, who use digital tools but keep a human voice at the center of the story. Finally, a global alert from UNESCO. The 2026 reports on world press freedom shows that while more people have access to information than ever before, news avoidance has hit an all-time high. In some regions, over 70% of people say that they actively avoid the news because it's too negative or overwhelming. This burnout is forcing media startups to rethink their strategy. Instead of a 24-hour flood of information, the new trend is bite-size, giving people high substance, neutral summaries that allow them to stay informed without the mental exhaustion. These stories shows us that the future of news isn't just about the technology we use, but about how we rebuild trust with the audience. And that's the end of our headline news for this episode.
Thank you for the quote and the headline news. It's always fun to have guests come to our studio, especially if they live locally here. Today we have the privilege of hosting Miss Niki of Bitesize BKK. She's a media innovator, a community builder, and the brain behind a short and snappy news source brand. And with me today are co-hosts VJ and Proud. All right, VJ will kick off our guest segment with our first question.
Welcome to the show, Miss Niki. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really nice to meet everyone here. So let's go back a bit. My name is Niki. I'm the founder of Bitesize BKK. So basically, we're an English language news platform that aims to break down complicated headlines, business news, tech, personal brand stories for the sort of younger generation of Thais. So our target audience is 25 to 35, and we funny fact, a lot of people actually think that Bitesize is geared toward expats, but actually the majority of our readership is Thai. So just like you guys, international school kids who sort of grew up with a local upbringing, but with a global perspective. So that's what, and I've been doing this for 5, going into 6 years now. Yeah.
So now that you've introduced yourself and what you do for work, could you share with us your educational journey?
Of course. Do you want me to go way back? So I'm Thai. I grew up in Bangkok. I went to Shrewsbury International School. So I stayed there up until end of high school, so year 13, as the English system calls it. And then I went to the UK to do my undergrad studies in politics and history at University of Exeter. And then I came back, got work experience for a year, went back to London for my master's at London School of Economics, also in politics and communications. And then, so what happened after that? Graduated 2023, I think, 24. And then I came back to start my career in Bangkok, wanted to come back home.
Now we have heard all your background. So what drew you into journalism?
To be honest, I don't even consider what I'm doing right now to be a traditional journalism track. So I think in order to answer that question meaningfully, I have to go back a little bit and talk about my career. So I have 2 degrees in politics and communication, so like very liberal arts background. When I came back to Bangkok, I realized that there wasn't a lot of options in if you wanted to be a sort of English content writer. There's 2, this was like over 10 years ago, right? So there's 2 very distinct traditional paths. You could either join a traditional news desk, like work for a newspaper, there's only a couple, or you could be a content writer in an advertising agency. And I actually did that. I became a copywriter for 10 months for an ad agency in Bangkok. And I did it, and I was just like, it was really fun to learn the environment of working. But at the end of the day, I felt like I wanted to do more. I wanted to understand how different pieces fit together. And when you're a copywriter in that time, you're very constrained to what the clients want. You have to write according to the brief. And even then, over 10 years ago, I was like, this is a little bit boring. And I couldn't imagine myself doing that for forever. So I was still young. So I was like, I'm going to pivot. So I actually went into tech. I started working at A-commerce, which is an e-commerce enabler for Southeast Asia, and I joined them quite early on, and it was around the same boom as the Lazada, Shopee boom in Bangkok. And I started to understand how content writing can fit into different realms and sectors of business. And then I realized that, having a writing background or interest isn't enough to pursue a meaningful career. You actually have to understand how to apply it. You have to understand how businesses work. And it sort of went from there. So I never pursued a traditional journalism background. So I was in tech PR for a couple of years. And then I moved on to Siam Commercial Bank to work as a venture capital analyst for their VC firm. And I'm, completely different skill set. I still got to frame stories, understand narratives, do presentations, which is really a really good sort of toolkit to understand how information is presented. And then after a few years at SCB, I started to think to myself, back then I was about 28, and I was like, what am I going to do now for the rest of my life? I felt like it was a sort of point where I had to choose. So then I started to go back to think about what I really wanted to do and what I was interested in, which led me to quit my job and started Bitesize. So that's the long-winded answer into how I sort of started what I'm doing now. But even now, I think I would never refer to myself as a journalist, because I think a traditional journalist would have a lot of skill sets that I don't, and I have a lot of skill sets that they may not need to use in their day-to-day. So it's a bit different.
Well, that was very interesting to share your background experiences. So what is your vision behind Bitesize Bangkok?
So when I first thought about wanting to go back to writing and having a content-focused career, I started to think about what Thailand's media landscape lacked. So this was pre-COVID, literally a year before the pandemic began. I was consuming a lot of news from the West. So there was a sort of growth in email newsletters, publications like The Skim, Morning Brew, all these sort of millennial-centered publications that focused on delivering very crisp, very timely analysis of important headlines. And I thought to myself, why is this not a thing in Bangkok? Why I would sit and talk to colleagues or friends and whatever, and they'd be like, what's going on here? Like, I don't get it. Why is this? Like, why do I need to know this? And then I was thinking to myself, like, there should be a sort of a place where younger people who are joining the workforce or growing up, educated students like you guys, go to find unfiltered news. So then Bitesize was a very personal project where I saw the gap in the market from my own need, and I decided to fill it.
So throughout all of the things that you've been through, how have you seen news or journalism change over the years?
It's changed a lot, even in, the span of 1 year. If you asked me this last year, my answer would be very different. I think there's no denying that traditional media is shifting. It still has a very prominent place in society. You've got, even in Thailand, like Bangkok Post, Thaigat, or in the West, you have the Guardian, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times. They still have a very sort of important cornerstone in media, but the way that information is presented, even through these traditional outlets, is changing. Social media, the rise of creators, TikTok, Instagram, email, and now artificial intelligence. So a lot of people make these sweeping statements and say that, like writers, journalism, it's dead, it's all about AI now. I feel like that's actually not true. Artificial intelligence has come in a way that is actually going to make us better at what we do. You should be encouraged to use these tools and update your knowledge. And I think journalism is different from both the production side and the consumer side. There's, especially younger generation, you can go to TikTok for news. Half of it's probably opinionated, or half of it is real things from credited journalists. So I think it's sort of creators in the sector are pivoting to integrate these tools into their daily life. But in terms of consumers, there's so much noise. There's almost too much noise to sort of go by on. You have to think very consciously about where you're reading, who you're reading it from, what kind of agenda. So I feel like today's audience, they're a lot sharper than audience in maybe 10 years ago, because we're very over-informed. And I think with the sort of growth of these tools and integration of AI, both sides of the table are just going to get more skilled. So it's going to shift in that way. People may turn to creator-led verticals to understand deeply about the topics they're interested in. They might sign up to purely finance newsletters, or they might go to TikTok to see what their favorite influencer is talking about. So I think news will follow wherever there is a platform, and you just have to kind of carve out your own diet in that space, if that makes sense.
So you mentioned the constant changes, such as like AI coming to space. So what do you think are some of the challenges journalists face in the digital age?
I think if you're a really traditional journalist, you're going to find that you're being squeezed out of a job. I think if you are sort of not interested in upskilling yourself and you're just sitting there doing your byline, then you're probably not going to find a lot of meaning in your work these days, I guess. And because I feel like nowadays you have to not only be a good writer, but you have to understand the context. And that's why I started with a tech background focus. I wanted to understand how everything fits together. So you have to sort of be very curious in adapting new technologies. You have to get onto Claude. You have to understand how co-work works. And you don't be resistant to change. You have to embrace it, and then you can be part of it. Otherwise, you're just going to get left behind. Journalists these days, they are more active on LinkedIn. They are, doing their branding stories, learning new skill sets. A lot of traditional journalists have actually, in the West anyway, left publications like New York Times and Wall Street Journal to start their own Substack because, they feel like they're carving out their own individual voice and paving their own career path, which I think is interesting. So if you use this opportunity for disruption to become a sort of go-getter, I think you can sort of find yourself flexible in any sort of career. But if you sort of stay, no, this is what traditional journalism has to be like, then I don't think it's going to be a very meaningful career going forward.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And also, when we talk about how fast media is changing right now, what challenges do you face when trying to learn facts and truth about a story?
A lot. And you know what? Like even now, because Bitesize is primarily on Instagram, I get the feedback from readers like real time. And there's always that like one or two really opinionated readers who will comment and spam you, and you just have to roll with it. I think it's the challenge is that now, because it's social media first, you have to be very responsive but not overly defensive, and you have to really own what you write. If you mess up and you have a typo or you have the wrong percentage, you have the privilege of changing it right away. But you also have to take that with getting called out, like, hey, why are you writing that? Is this a paid post? Is that you have to be accountable to what you publish, even more so than before, because there's no sort of formal paywall to hide behind. So I think that's the big challenge. And in terms of information, because the way I run Bitesize, we're not newsbreakers, and a lot of times we don't get quotes from the source. So what we do is we curate and we rewrite in our own way, but we have to make sure that whatever we quote, statistics quote, is sort of credited and double checked. So I would only get data points and quotes from very reputable medias like Bangkok Post, The Nation, or if it's abroad, then it's Bloomberg or New York Times, and then it has to be that sort of level of fact checking.
Can you describe the process of taking like a very complex story and converting it into a bite-sized news piece?
That's a really good question. Funnily enough, now basically if I don't understand something, like I have a real world example right now. I am writing about Thailand's infrastructural challenges in regards to energy policy, which is a sort of direct consequence of the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. And I don't have an energy background. I don't think a lot of people do. And it's something really dry and really difficult. And I was just like, before I write about this to others, I have to understand it. So actually it's a lot of research that goes into it. When I, even just from reading the news, sometimes it's not clear. So then I go into Claude and I say, please break down this, and explain to me how it affects households. And so you have to sort of read from the source and then digest your understanding whichever way it works, and then clarify your own understanding with it, so you have the authority to write about it simply. So that's the process that I go through when it's like a complicated topic. And because I've always studied politics, right? I have 2 degrees. I didn't have sort of a data-driven background that I have to relearn. So that's why it goes back to my point about always being able to upskill yourself. Even like very silly things, like I also do a lot of lifestyle writing, and there's been a lot of clients that want to advertise their padel and tennis courts. I never used to play tennis before. Now I play tennis every week, just to understand what the trend is, why things get popular, the sort of social niche of it, I guess. So I think the answer to that question is that you have to approach everything like you're really hungry to learn. And I think that's something that can stick with you throughout any career that you guys decide to have.
And also like being able to adapt through like environments, right? So, but like we know that Bitesize use Instagram pretty often. So how do you use social media to enhance your storytelling?
I think, how do I use social media? I guess social media is the platform, right? So it's not even enhancing. It's bite size wouldn't exist without social media. And I had this sort of dilemma with myself a few years ago when a lot of people said, yeah, social media is great to finding new customers, but you cannot rely on Instagram or Facebook or whatnot. You should have your own sort of domain. So then I ran with the MailChimp email website for a while, but I was like, the audience are not engaging. You have to stick to the belief that, you build something and you want to be where the people are, right? It's like launching a clothes shop in a mall that no one goes to. Like, what's the point? So then I was just like, it doesn't matter. Yes, you have your own domain, you have your own sort of readership list, but if your audience, like over half of them are still engaging on social media, third-party app, you have to sort of be flexible and stay and evolve with them. And funnily enough, with social media, I feel like a lot of platforms have their own distinct personalities. So when I started Bite Size Instagram, we actually had Facebook running at the same time. Funnily enough, Facebook in Thailand is still amongst like one of the most used platforms for creators and thought leaders. This would not be the case if you were interviewing a content creator in the US. But a lot of Thai people are on Facebook. But that's not the case for bite-sized readers. So I feel like people who engage on Facebook now for media, they're a little bit older and they digest content in Thai. So I tried that for a year and I was like, this is not where our audience is. I don't have to waste time just to have it be spread everywhere. So then I decided to double down on Instagram, and I feel like that's where our organic reach is. That's where we're meeting all of our organic readers, and it's been that way for the past 6 years. So hopefully it sticks, because I don't want to build another audience on a new platform.
So now that Bite Size Media has been running for about 6 years, how has your perspective on news changed over time?
I think it is changed because the way we interact with it has changed. I think the important thing to understand about news is that a lot of topics and people, subject matters, get people really fired up. People take news so personally, and sometimes there are things that I am hesitant to write about. I just don't want to deal with the sort of angry readers today on this, or so if you are in the business of writing news, you have to have a sort of responsibility to what you write, and you have to think about how it impacts you, because the world is so divisive. There's so many conflicts. Every month we wake up to like a lot of bad news. You have to be very mindful of that, and I think the fact that news has become a bit productized and a bit sort of creator-led, it's gotten people closer to the topics, to the subjects, which has pros and cons. Because I feel like it makes people sort of emotional, so I think that's what's changed about the news for me, and especially doing so on social. But you have to stay committed to your mission and try to be as neutral as possible.
Now, moving on to a question personally about you. So what impact do you hope your work will have to people in the society?
That's a big question. I mean, I don't know if I would have that sort of influence, but if I do, I would hope that we are somewhere credible where people can come to understand how the world works, understand their position in the sort of day-to-day movement, and just learn a couple of things or two every day. I think that's all I would hope to be.
So next on, what advice would you give to young people, like such as us who are international students or possibly entering the workforce, who want to keep up on current events?
Read bite-sized. I think my advice would be to stay curious about the world. There's so much happening all the time, and it's so accessible because of social, because news. I feel like that you have to be curious and wanting to stay educated. I think it's important, like regardless of where you choose to live or what profession you choose to pursue in the future, you have to know what's going on. And because everything is connected, and you'll learn that as you go along. Why is, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East affecting Thai households? How is that important to job application against inflation next year? Everything is connected. And I think the more you have a sort of condensed understanding of that, the more well-rounded you're going to be. But I would say that it's so important to not just read from one source, because not to say that all news platforms have their agendas, but it's always a little bit of perspective. It depends on, what they want to convey, what they think personally, and especially today in the age, I feel like you should still go to legacy media publications for the facts, and then find whoever frames it in the way that you like for other things. It doesn't hurt to sort of be well-rounded in your media diet. I think it's really important too. And because at the end of the day, when you grow up and you start working, you're going to find that most people don't share the same views as you, and you have to sort of be able to reconcile that with your own thoughts, and it makes you a better thinker. And, for people who want to pursue a career in journalism or whatnot, it's not actually the writing part is easy. It's the thought process behind it that's so important. You cannot be a good writer if you don't think well. So I think that's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Niki. This has been such an eye-opening look at the vision behind your news brand, Bitesize Bangkok. What a great concept. Journalism and the delivery of news has been repackaged, redesigned, and redelivered to an increasingly online and distracted audience, which is us. So thank you for doing that and showing us the way forward. Okay, we need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this short PSA.
1, 2, 3, 4.
In a world where everyone has a smartphone, the definition of a journalist is changing. You don't need a massive newsroom to start seeking the truth. You just need curiosity and a sense of responsibility. Becoming a journalist starts with being a responsible citizen. It means refusing to be gullible. Don't just believe the first thing you hear or the loudest headline you see on your feed. To be your own journalist, you must critically analyze the news, ask who wrote it, what the evidence is, and why they want you to feel a certain way. Want to practice? Start a literary magazine at your school or a digital blog for your community. It's a space to sharpen your voice and hold a mirror up to the world around you. And remember, sometimes the truth is hidden, and that's where whistleblowers come in. These are brave individuals who expose information about wrongdoing or hidden activities within an organization to protect the public. They remind us that the truth is worth fighting for. You have the tools, you have the platform. Don't just read the news, be the person who ensures the news is worth reading. Stay sharp, stay critical, and remember, your voice is a tool for truth.
And we are back. For this segment, we bring you part 8 of our 10-part adventure story titled The Mystery of St. Augustine. But before we jump into part 8, here's a brief recap of part 7.
The hunt for Drake's gold has turned lethal. While searching for intel at the Basilica, agents of the Table remove yet another person who is in their path. Though the syndicate attempt to scrub the scene, they left behind evidence and a man in a hat on surveillance, providing Lieutenant Walsh with a direct forensics link to another crime. Unaware of the tragedy, James and Amanda analyze rare 17th century architectural drawings and realize the ghost ship never reached the ocean. Too heavy to escape a storm, the vessel foundered and sank right there in the harbor. But as the team pinpoints the treasure's location, a devastating call from Tom reveals that Sarah is gone. All the while, the shadowy group plots its next mission. And now, without further ado, here's part 8, titled The Fort.
This exciting research project had just taken a dark and unknown turn. Hawthorne was not naive to danger. He had seen plenty of it in his career. However, murder was something deeper, darker, different, something he could not understand. Not the act itself. That's pretty straightforward. A life taken by someone else. No, it was the thinking behind the act, the mind of the person who would commit such a devious thing. This is the thing James did not understand, the mind. So he sat there looking past Amanda, who was also in shock at the news. Words were lost to both of them. It was late in the evening and dark outside. The lobby was quiet. The portfolio briefcase was still open and lying on the coffee table with its papers spread out. Hawthorne looked down at the papers and tried to ignore the weird feeling in his chest. This feeling was familiar, though he had not felt it for many, many years. Neither the gold rush scandal nor the incident in Mexico had resurrected this old feeling. So why is this different and now? He couldn't answer that question, but he knew he could not ignore it. As he stared at the old parchment papers, he silently accepted their invitation to plunge deeper into the mystery. He picked up his phone and called Tom back.
Tom was back at the Historical Society's offices, waiting for one of the detectives to show up. He stayed out of Sarah's office, knowing that the detective would want to search it after he had secured a search warrant. It was late. Cece was there too. Tom could tell she was angry, sad, and didn't want to go home. She was sitting behind the reception desk located in the front lobby area. Tom was pacing back and forth by the front doors, waiting for the detective to show up when his phone rang. "Hello, James," Tom said into his phone after answering it. "Is everything okay?" Tom stopped pacing and stood there listening. He nodded his head and then said, "Well, the timing is a little interesting in light of what just happened, but I understand your logic and the urgency of the matter." Tom paused and then listened some more, then replied, "I've got to wait for the detective to show up. Cece is here with me as well. Let me ask her." Tom looked over at Cece, who was now sitting up straight and leaning forward in the chair she was sitting in, and then asked, "This is a big ask. Professor Hawthorne wants to see if we can get access to the fort yet this evening. He's got some new information that's related to our research, and well, he thinks it's quite urgent we go there tonight and not wait until tomorrow. What do you think?"
Cece stood up immediately and replied, "Yes, I'll go. I don't want to go home. I'm mad. I'm sad. I feel like we need to do something."
"Okay," Tom replied to Cece. "I have to wait here for the detective, so why don't you go meet the professor there at the fort? I'll call Chris over at the fort and tell him what's going on and why you and the professor are there. I can then join you once the detective leaves." Tom then explains all this to Hawthorne and then hangs up the phone. "Cece, are you sure you want to do this tonight?"
"Of course," Cece answered. "I want to finish this. I'm doing no good just sitting around here being sad. I want to feel like I'm doing something, and this will take my mind off Sarah for the time being."
"I understand," Tom replied. "You'll need to meet Professor Hawthorne by the main front entrance in 30 minutes. That should give me enough time to convince Chris to accompany both of you in whatever the professor wants to do there tonight."
Midnight sat in the dark car 2 blocks down from the old church. It was late into night, not yet 11. All but one police cruiser had already left the scene. The yellow police tape was still up around the front of the church building. The street, full of curious neighbors, have also retreated into their homes by now. She and Six were looking for the other research team. The table's only mission now was to follow the other research team. The contracts with Iro were completed. The table was now operating on its own.
"If they were here, I think we've missed him," Chair 6 said.
"You're probably right," Chair 2 replied. "Can you text the other chairs to make sure they understand to keep their distance if they find them?"
"Yeah, doing it now," 6 replied. No sooner had 6 sent her message to chairs 3, 4, and 5 than received a quick message back from chair 3 that said, "Found one of their team members leaving the Historical Society office now. We'll follow. She's alone." 6 texted back, "Keep your distance. Don't do anything dumb." She then said to chair 2, "The guys are following one of the other researchers. They said she's alone and she just left the Historical Society's office."
"Have them text you their location when they stop whatever they're doing. We can then meet them there," Midnight answered. This is our only mission right now, to find out what they know and what they're doing.
James parked his rental in the parking lot at the old fort, near the main entrance that the tourists use during the day. The parking lot was dark, illuminated by only a few overhead lights. He sent a quick text to Anne letting her know what he was doing, hoping she would not worry. After all, he wasn't going to be alone. Cece was on her way, and so was the fort's director. Tom would be joining shortly as well. As Hawthorne sat there in silence, he finally identified that feeling that was nagging him. It had settled in his gut and would not go away. It was a knot, and it was unsettling. The word resolve came to mind. Yes, that was it. Resolve was needed, not tomorrow or the next day, but tonight. Things needed to be resolved. These things were immediate. A few minutes later, a set of car lights turned into the parking lot, followed by a second pair. Both vehicles pulled up next to Hawthorne's car. James got out of his car at the same time as Cece and Chris Lawson.
Professor Hawthorne, Cece said as she gestured toward Chris Lawson, standing next to her. This is Mr. Lawson. He's the facilities director here at the old fort.
Please call me Chris, Mr. Lawson said. Cece filled me in over the phone about what transpired over at the church this evening. She also explained to me a little about what you and your team are here doing, partnering with Tom over at the Historical Society. Anyway, I'm here to help. I knew Sarah, and so this feel a little personal for me too. He then asked, so what are we doing here tonight?
Thank you for your help, Chris, and nice to meet you, Hawthorne answered, and then said plainly, I think there is a sunken ship under the foundation of this fort, specifically the southeast corner.
What? Really? Cece replied.
After you and Tom left the restaurant earlier this evening, Eleanor gave us some old documents, meant as a gift and thank you to the Historical Society. These documents are the original copies of the fort's architectural engineering designs. I did not bring the originals, but I did take a photo of one of the documents, which includes detailed drawings and designs of the fort's foundation.
And you believe there is a ship buried somewhere under the foundation? Mr. Lawson asked while looking somewhat unconvinced. Chris stood there thinking and then asked, if this is true, the ship would date back to the 16th or 17th centuries, before this stone fort was constructed. Whoa, wait, you're not saying what I think you are saying, are you?
Cece jumped into the conversation and replied to Chris's question. Yes, I think he's saying what you think he's saying.
Which is what? Hawthorne asked.
Cece looked at Mr. Lawson and then answered for both of them. This could be one of Sir Francis Drake's ships.
Whoa, really? Chris responded and then asked, okay, Professor, what are we looking for? Do you know this fort is very complex? It's filled with all sorts of rooms, passageways, and small corners and turns.
We need to look in the southeast corner. According to these old document plans we have, this section was constructed over the old pier. That old pier serviced both the old wooden fort that used to be here and the small settlement of St. Augustine. When the Spanish returned and built this stone fort 100 years after the famous Drake raid, it looks like they backfilled a section of the harbor and drove large wooden pylons into the soggy ground. And if my colleague and I are correct, one of Drake's ships sank while docked at the old wooden pier in a bad storm before it could join the other ships. Hawthorne paused for a moment and then gestured toward the front main entry and said, shall we?
Chairs 3, 4, and 5 had been sitting in their car across the street from the old fort. They were crouched down, peering through the front windshield and watching 3 people standing in the fort's parking lot having a conversation. Chair 3 sends a text message to 2 and 6. It reads, outside the fort, 3 people talking. What's our next move? 3 waits a moment and then reads the incoming response out loud. 4 and 5 to follow. 3 wait in the car. Coming.
Let's go, 5, Chair 4 says. We can gain entrance through the gift shop. The security is weak, 4 then asks. You've got your piece, right?
Yeah, of course, 5 responded.
Make sure you've attached a suppressor. The stone walls will be unforgiving without it, Chair 4 responded.
Chair 1 knows how to supply us with the good stuff, 5 says as he starts to pick the lock to the side door of the gift shop.
Yeah, the O9 is the best on the market for the 9mm, especially the short configuration, Chair 4 responded as they both entered the now unlocked side gift shop door, making sure to avoid the one CCTV camera located in the gift shop. They stayed low to the ground, followed the sidewall, and then walked through the narrow hallway that connected them to the main west passageway inside the fort.
In each of the stone passageways, there were small recessed soft lights that pointed straight down to the ground. There was plenty of light to see. Chairs 5 and 4 looked at a tourist brochure at the schematic of the fort and found the "You are here" message. Let's go left, follow the wall around, and it should eventually bring us back to where we are standing. The fort is a star shape, so we can scout out each corner, passageway, and room as we go along. The others entered through the fort entrance. We don't know which way they went, 5 said.
Chair 4 checked his comms to see if they were still connected with Chair 2. Bleak! Comms are down, 4 responded as he started walking slowly and quietly through the first passageway. Nothing is getting in or out of these stone walls. I can't report back to midnight.
It's fine. We know what to do if things go bad, 5 responded.
Comms aren't working, Chair 6 says, while clearing out the front windshield into the dark. What do we do?
Give me a minute, Chair 2 responds as he tries contacting Chair 1.
This better be important, Chair 1 says, as he answers the call from midnight.
Sorry, sir. I know it's still early there, but this is important. 4 and 5 are in the fort following the other team. 6 and 3 are here with me, on standby, Midnight replies.
So, what's the problem? Chair 1 asks.
We need to know how far we're willing to go. I mean, Chairs 4 and 5, how can I say this, can be wild cards sometimes, Midnight says.
Yeah, and they might just be what we need right now. I'm going off my hunch and a feeling that the other group you're following is onto something bigger, something we don't know yet. It's a feeling I have, so follow through with it, Chair 1 responds and adds before hanging up. My day is just starting now, so keep me updated, but if only it is significant enough. This isn't the only thing I'm dealing with right now.
Chair 3 leans forward from the back seat and says, "We're on standby. Comms don't work. So how exactly will we know if something goes down?"
Midnight looks back at Chair 3 and answers. We'll let this play out. Chairs 4 and 5 will do what they do. And if things go sideways, we, meaning us in this car right now, we bolt.
Clicking his teeth, Chair 3 slides into his back seat and responds, "That's cold."
We're approaching the southeast corner section of the interior. Just as a reference, just beyond this thick stone wall, on the other side is the interior courtyard area. It's a basic square shape with grass. If you want, we can cut across that when we leave instead of walking back through the corridors again. Chris continues as he watches Professor Hawthorne inspects an old wooden door that seemed to lead downward toward the outer wall. And Professor, I think that is what you are interested in.
Yeah, sounds good about the courtyard. This door, I'm assuming, leads down into the lower foundation chamber? Hawthorne asked.
Yes, that's correct. We hardly ever go down since it's not very useful for what the fort is used for these days. But you'll see where the dirt turns to mud and then mixes with the water. You will also see the large wooden pylon which helps support some of the outer walls of the wing. It's actually quite the engineering marvel if you ask me. Chris answered as he unlocked the door and opened it. He then looks back at the professor and says, "Professor, shall we?"
By all means, Hawthorne replies, and then looks back at Cece.
Yeah, let's do it. After you, Professor, says Cece.
Chris, you lead, please, James says.
Of course. Follow me. Chris proceeds to enter the lower chamber, stepping carefully downward on the old rusty metal staircase that had been installed decades ago. He then warns, "Be careful of these steps. We've needed to replace these a long time ago. Anyway, it should be fine so long as you don't jump up and down. Okay, to the depths of the dungeon we go."
Hawthorne follows Chris down the metal rusty stairs, taking one step at a time. Then Cece. As they all make it down to level ground, Hawthorne notices the smell and the mud. Hawthorne thinks to himself, Chris was right. It does feel and smell like a dungeon down here. It was dark and damp. Chris had brought a powerful flashlight and was pointing it towards the ground as they walked forward towards the water line. Chris, do you mind pointing that light at the pylons? The professor in me wants to know how these large wooden trees they used haven't rotted over the years.
As you can see, St. Augustine reinforced the pylon years ago with steel. But if you inspect the wood itself, you'll still see the tar and pitch the Spanish used to preserve them, Chris replied.
I knew of this technique, but only thought they used it on their large galleons and boats. But of course it would have the same effect if used like this, James replied.
Professor, was there a particular spot you wanted to inspect? Chris asked.
Yes, according to what we know, the ground, well, mud, we are standing on is some of the backfill that was placed here. So the old pier would either be partially under this mud or closer to the water line over there, James replied.
Cece had wandered off several yards, taken off her shoes, and was wading into the water and mud mid-shin. She stopped a moment as she stepped on something that wasn't mud, something solid. She looked down at the dark water and said, "Hey Chris, can you shine your light over here?" She watched as the light hit the water by her feet. She was standing on a small piece of wood. Cece could tell it was old, the surface was slippery, and it appeared to be flat, like a plank of wood. "Hey, I found something over here, in the water, just under the surface. It's sticking above the mud a little and protrudes out deeper."
Really? Chris replied. It's probably just a part of old scaffolding used when they installed some of the reinforced steel supports. But we'll come look.
What's the matter, Chris? Afraid to get your feet wet? James says as he took off his shoes and socks and started wading out to where Cece was standing. Plus, we need your light out here. James knew Chris wouldn't be offended by his comment. He also knew Chris would be just as curious about this thing in the water as he was.
I'm coming with my light. Just give me a minute. Chris answered as he struggled to get his shoes and socks off. What a mess. Chris mumbled as his feet sank into a muddy water.
"It's right under my left foot," Cece replied as she pointed down.
Chris, now standing between Hawthorne and Cece, points his light straight down into the dark, murky water, then says, "Yeah, that's not old scaffolding. That plank of wood is not wide enough. Here, hold this light." Chris then hands the light to Hawthorne, reaches down into the water and touches the plank of wood, then tries to move it.
"See, it feels greasy," Cece said.
"Yes, and now my hand is too," Chris replied as he pulled his arm back up out of the water and then smelled the palm of his hand. That's tar.
Playing devil's advocate here, don't you think the construction team who put those steel braces in would have found this and then alerted the city council if they thought it was something with historical value? Hawthorne asked.
No, because they were not working in this location. They stopped over that center pylon over there, Chris answered, while pointing to the center of the chamber.
"If neither of you is going to say it, I will," Cece added. "This could be either part of the old wooden pier or part of the ship itself. Now, I don't think they would have soaked the wooden pier in pitch and tar. So, what if this is part of the ship here, just sticking up out of the mud?"
Shining his light up at Cece and Hawthorne, Chris then said, "Well, I would say that we might have just made the discovery of the century. We need to, of course, get this verified first. We also need to keep this quiet."
I think Cece's assessment is correct. The only part of the old wooden pier that would have had pitch and tar on it would have been the round vertical post that sat halfway in the water. The plank of wood here is plain flat, which means it could be part of the outside or middle span of the ship.
"Chris, give me your pocket knife. I'm going to scrape off a piece of wood so we can take it with us to get it tested," Cece said.
Chris, who always wears a small multi-tool with a pocket knife on the inside of his belt, just under his shirt, opened it and hands it to Cece. He watches as she reaches down into the water and struggles to scratch at the slippery, waterlogged plank of wood. "How did you know I have a pocket knife?"
Cece pulls her hands back out of the water and cradles a small piece of wood she had just managed to scrape off the side of the wooden plank. She hands Chris his pocket knife back and says, "Everybody knows you carry a pocket knife on your belt. You don't hide it very well."
Did you guys see that? Hawthorne said, alarmed by something he had just seen out of the corner of his eye. They all froze and looked up towards the direction Hawthorne was staring at.
What did you see? Chris asked.
I don't know. Maybe it was just a shadow from your light bouncing off the pylons, Hawthorne replied. Anyways, let's go. We have our sample. Let's get out of this mud.
A few minutes later, the three were back up in the passageway. After shutting and locking the chamber door, Chris said, "We can cut across the interior courtyard and head out through the side door." Halfway across the center courtyard, Chris' phone sends an alert. He looks down at it and notices that the silent alarm has been triggered, coming from the gift shop. That's weird. I've gotten an alarm going off from the gift shop.
"Really?" Cece replies. "Is that normal?"
Yes and no. I mean, just last month, one of the windows was broken and set off the alarm. Come to find out, it was some juveniles out late throwing rocks. Sometimes they like to come onto the property and hang out late at night, which we are trying to crack down on," Chris replied.
Which way is the gift shop? Hawthorne asked.
"It's straight over it through that door. We can leave through the gift shop. It will take us back into the parking area," Chris replied. "I need to turn off the alarm, and I have to be inside the gift shop to do that."
Wait, stop. Do you hear that? I hear voices. Chair 5 whispers to 4.
Yeah, I do, Chair 4 replied. Step into the shadow. Chairs 4 and 5 watch as an old side door opens and 3 people enter the section they were walking through. They conceal themselves in the shadows and watch. They can hear the 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, talking about the gift shop. They watch as the 3 people walk in the opposite direction from where they are standing, toward the gift shop. "We follow," 4 whispers to 5.
Chris, Hawthorne, and Cece approach the hallway that leads into the gift shop and turn the corner. The hallway, which connected the stone fort to the exterior gift shop building, was approximately 20 yards in length. Halfway down the hallway, Chris stopped and said, "Wait, the door to the gift shop is open."
"Is that a bad thing?" Cece responded.
"It will be if you move any further," Chair 4 said, emerging from the shadow of the passageway.
Hawthorne, startled by the mysterious voice behind him, turned around quickly and was immediately met with a cold piece of steel pressed into his forehead. Hawthorne froze. He didn't move, and didn't say a word. He knew exactly what was pressed into his forehead, and it hurt. He squinted, trying to see past the barrel into the shadow, but he could not make out the face that was looking directly into his eyes.
"Don't do anything stupid, or this guy goes first," Chair 4 replied. "Answer 2 questions. Just know, how you answer will dictate my next action," Chair 4 said sharply. Chair 4 knew 5 was standing behind him, and he wanted to keep it that way. Chair 4 did not want the hassle of dealing with 3 bodies tonight. It's not that he didn't have the stomach for it. He just didn't want the mess of the tension it would bring. First question, what does the detective know?
Hawthorne, who still had the pistol barrel pressed into his forehead, said nothing. He wasn't sure what to say. Cece was silent, standing behind him. Chris was silent, standing behind her. "I'll answer this question with a question," Hawthorne thought to himself. "And your second question?" Hawthorne then said.
"What?" replied 5.
"You said you have 2 questions, and you have given us your first question, so I'm curious about what your second question is," James answered while slowly moving backwards to relieve the pressure of the gun on his forehead.
"Just answer the first question," Chair 5 responded. "This is a waste of time," Chair 4 said as he emerged from the shadow to look Hawthorne in the eyes. "You heard him. What does the detective know?"
I don't know the answer to that question because I haven't talked to the detective personally, but if you're referring to the break-in at the Historical Society a couple days ago, and if that was you guys, well, you did a pretty good job covering your tracks, Hawthorne answered.
Cece, who was slightly shorter than Hawthorne, was standing directly behind him. She backed up slowly so she could peer around Hawthorne. She wanted to get a look at these 2 guys. She could partially see the face of one of the men, but could not see the face of the other man who was holding the gun. She put her hand in her handbag, felt around and found what she was looking for.
Because there was very little light in the hallway, Chris had slowly been moving backward, and he now stood in the open doorway to the gift shop. Behind him was a dark, large retail space full of shelves, counters, and other products and hangings that you would typically find in the tourist gift shop. He contemplated on what to do. He knew he could slip away, but he did not want to leave Hawthorne or Cece there, knowing they would take a brunt of the violence if the two men were to see him take off and run.
What's your second question? I'd be happy to answer because nothing I know is worth dying for, Hawthorne said with a bit more serious voice this time.
We watched you leave that dark pit. What did you find down there?
Come on, they don't know anything, Chair 5 said softly.
Well, if that's your second question, I'd be happy to answer that. Part of my research project included looking for an old wooden pier that used to service this fort. That's it, an old wooden dock. You know, that thing you tie boats to, Hawthorne replied.
By this time, Chris had backed up and was standing inside the gift shop, partially concealed by the door. He stood still. We have nothing to do with what you are involved in. Just go, Chris said.
Stop moving, Chair 4 said as he looked past Hawthorne.
Chair 5, without saying a word, pushed past Chair 4, raised his gun, and fired 2 shots.
A huge thank you to Niki for sharing her journey and her advice for all of us trying to stay informed without burning out. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed this media talk, please make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. Don't forget to follow us on social media, leave us a review and a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay truthful and be inspired. And as always, this podcast would not be possible without the hard work and support of our international student production team.
All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com, a vibrant community of creatives sharing copyright-free images, videos, and music.
And we're signing off until next time. We are Students Incorporated because your voice matters.